Welcome back to GBGuns Armory, the spot where we're going over stuff that's been out for a while. I'm giving you a little more of the thoughts and feels and backstory, and you guys are providing your opinions and experiences because this is stuff that's been out for a while, and chances are you've owned it, shot it, held it, know a buddy who has, etc. I want this to become the Reddit thread of feedback, opinion, and history on these things. So we don't forget the great guns that came out 6 months, 6 years ago, what have you, that are still good guns. They're just not necessarily the hotness in the main media right now. Tonight is the Walther Q5 match steel frame. This is based on the PPQ line. It was one of the early guns, for me anyways, to have speed holes. Those lightning cuts in the slide, that metal remove there, is to help compensate for the weight of adding an optic. This optic is an older Sightmark M spec, excellent optic. It was one of the first optics that I began to really trust and rely upon. And then the frame is CNC'd out of steel, and hopefully the light will catch the curves up under that trigger guard and that curve on the heel. You see the longer beaver tail there. These are some aftermarket grips that were done for me, of course with the GBGuns logo on it. This, for me, was my first all-steel 5-inch gun. It was one of the first competition-oriented pistols that I got to review and have hands on, and really where I started to learn to appreciate a lot of features that are kind of, they've somewhat moved into the regular carry world, or at least become more common. The magazine well, for example. You guys, I'm sure, have heard my opinion on magwells in the tabletop videos. There's your magwell right there. If you have a double stack magazine that's single feed, you have an inverse funnel shape on the magazine. If you can't get that in, you just need to practice. So I'm not big on having a magwell, except for when it does this. See how it scoops my pinky in there? It locks my hand into the gun, and when the gun tries to recoil and rock upward, I have extra leverage and strength on my pinky, which is how you control that nose rise very easily thanks to that. So came to really appreciate that. Also, this thing being so absurdly heavy was where I first came to really appreciate basic physics, right? So because it's a heavy gun, and although the 5-inch barrel is giving you a little more muzzle energy, so you are getting a little bit more power out of it, the heavier gun compensates for that recoil very well, so you feel less recoil. Additionally, having this long, heavy slide, the action of the slide is a little bit slower because it's a lot more weight to get moving, stop moving, start moving again, and come to a stop. And so that sort of smoothens out the recoil impulse. And that was something that I had not paid attention to prior to having this thing. I also just think it's damn sexy. It's a good looking gun. And I believe, speaking of movie, as I almost said there, I believe in Deadpool, this is what Cable was using. He didn't have these grips, which is probably why he was unable to hit Deadpool. Obviously, with GBGuns grips, your accuracy goes up by at least 5, right? But jokes aside, spectacular pistol. It was very expensive when it came out. Comparatively, the $2,500 handgun mark hadn't yet become as, I don't want to say socially acceptable, socially aware as it is nowadays. Thanks to companies like Staccato, people aren't shocked anymore to hear that a handgun costs that much. But these, I think, were around $1,800, and that was still up there at the time, at least in my mind, as a defensive shooter. Not usually handling things that cost more than $600-700 most. But realizing that this is German steel, CNC'd in Germany, then shipped. I mean, heck, even the shipping costs of getting these to the States is more than it is on a polymer gun because the dang thing weighs more. So everything about putting this together costed a little bit more. Recently on the main channel we reviewed its replacement, the PDP match steel frame. The styling on it is a little more modern, I guess you could say, but I still think this is pretty sexy. This is great looking. Ironically, one of the things on this that you might be noticing is we've got a fiber optic front sight and a red dot. And that's counterintuitive. At the time that this came out, and of course, without the dot on there, you have a rear sight. Running dots wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now, and having a fiber optic front sight gave you a lot of the speed advantages that dots do now. So I think Walther went with that fiber optic front sight, thinking some people will compete with a dot, but most people are going to compete with irons. Nowadays, you don't get stuff like that on competition guns, or they make sure it's a contrasting color, say green fiber optic, to make sure that it's not going to distract you accidentally from your red dot in your pistol. Funny story on that, by the way. My Bull Armory SAS2 TAC 4 1/4, the fiber optic option at the time when I swapped out the black sight for fiber optic was green, and as it turns out, my current favorite dot to use, not on my carry gun of course, is the Viridian, which is a green dot. So I go to mount a dot on there, and now I've got a green dot and a green fiber optic, and it's the same problem that you have with a red dot and a red fiber optic. If only there were more colors in the world, right? Anyways, I'm curious how many of you have had a chance to hold or shoot or own one of these masterpieces. Spectacular gun. This beaver tail extension here was done away with on the PDP version. I could see, depending on your draw style, holster positioning and whatnot, maybe that tail would catch, but for me as more of a strong side guy, it was not a problem for me. But trends change. That's one of the reasons we're doing these videos, is to remember that it's not so long ago that things that are standard now were just kind of optional or the outliers. Q5 match steel frame, beautiful gun, proud piece of the GBGuns Armory. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.